Hey guys, it's Abby from Autumn with Pellinor, and today I'm going to be going through my 2020 reading stats. So I managed to read 78 books in 2020 and I track them all on a spreadsheet. Last year I used Portal in the Pages spreadsheet. She has one again for 2021. I'm still deciding whether I'm using that, a different spreadsheet I found, or my own, or the core pile. There's a lot to choose from. I might use them all. Let's have a look through the statistics of what I read in 2020. Combining the 78 books that I read 25,298 pages this year. Yes, I did have to check. And the average pages per book was 324, which I don't think is too bad. It means I didn't go too far into the realm of only reading my shortest books, whilst still getting through a decent number. Then onto the books themselves. Here is the number of books that I read each month. In January and February I read 9, in March I read 3, April I read 4, in June, why did I miss May? May I also read 4. In June I read 11, in July I read 16, in August I read 8, in September I read 5, in October I read 3, in November I read 3, and in December I read 3. The reason for that not quite matching up with my wrap-ups is because if I start a book in November and finish it in December, it counts it for November's tracking, but it still rounds out to the same thing in its total. But yeah, it considers, like for example, The Song Rising to have been read in November. With the pages read each month, the most pages read, unsurprisingly, was in July, with 23% of my pages being read in that month, which is 5,792 pages, which is pretty high. And another good month that I had, well, a couple of good months, was February and June. February was 3,070 and June was 3,041, both of them at around 12% there. And the rest of the month I didn't do too badly. August was like just under 3,000, so I seem to have like an average, like a minimum of like 1,000. I know that October dips just below that, that was 838, and November actually dips below it slightly as well, even though it includes The Sun Rising at 971. But it seems to kind of be, that's around just under the 1,000 mark is the minimum I read each month, and then it goes up from there, which is always nice. In terms of the lengths of the books that I'm reading, the vast majority of them are in the 200 to 500 mark. I think that totals a good like 70% of the books in that middle section. I read 6 books less than 100 pages, 1 book between 600 and 699, I think that's The Secret Commonwealth, and 1 book between 800 and 899, that's definitely Priory of the Orange Tree. I do tend to stick on the realm of the shorter side of books, but I am happy to see that I have read a good number, I think it's 19 books for the 400 to 499 page length. I think that is a decent number, starting to kind of get up there into reading more of my bigger books, which is something that I struggled with before because I liked to try and, just moving over so you can see the stats better, I like to try and get through as many books as I can in a year, so I keep picking up the shortest ones just because then it'll be done for the numbers, but I'd like my page count to be higher, so I'm probably going to focus a little more on page numbers next year than physical books. Then I take a look at the age ranges that these books are categorised within. I remember doing this in 2019 and being very surprised because my adult age range was so much bigger than anything else. This year it is a little more even between adult and YA, although adult is still higher at 38 with YA at 33, but I only read 9 kids books. Now for me, kids is middle grade and below that. I don't think I read anything below middle grade this year, but I just put that on there. I would like to start reading books in German, so it would be below middle grade that I was starting with. So that is why it's just kids instead of middle grade. It's just anything underneath YA. I do think that part of the reason why I read so much YA was that I was attempting in the, what's it called? It's not the Booktuber one. what is it? The reading rush. I was attempting in the reading rush to get through quite a lot of books, so a lot of them would be YA because I tend to go through them faster. So that was like a good 7 books straight away, as well as just picking some more up, I guess. I wonder why I went back to YA, that's interesting. Then for the formatting of my books, unsurprisingly, paperback wins. 53 books were in paperback this year, with the next highest category being hardback at 14 books, and then ebooks at 12 and audiobooks at 1. That one audiobook was The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. It's amazing. I need to listen to other works by her. But yes, I always read more paperbacks for a variety of reasons, one of them being I own more paperbacks. I prefer to read physically. I'm fine with ebooks, but I just have a preference for physical reading, like ink on paper. And a lot of the books that I have are paperbacks because they're cheaper, there's more of them in charity shops. It's quite a common format in the UK to find in charity shops. It's rarer to find a second-hand hardback. So that's part of the reason, at least. Now we're on to whether the book is in a series or not, and this graph is a little misleading. I can see it down here on my tablet just so I have like a reference of what you guys are looking at if you're wondering what I'm looking at. And it is a little misleading because it makes it look as though I've read more standalones than anything else, but you have to remember that the others are all series. It's just separated into different bits. So I read 35 standalone books, that's 44% of my books, are not in any sort of series whatsoever. And I always feel like I'm reading more books that are in series, so that always feels weird to me. The same thing happened last year. But I am reading, what is it, 56% of my books were in series there. 29 are just in a big overarching series, so 4 books or more. There were 10 in trilogies and 6 in duologies. For the star ratings of all of these books, my averaging these all out, adding them up, dividing them by 78, is 4 stars on the dot, 4.0, which is really high. I had a great reading year. I did read majority 4 stars, so 38 4-star books, but 21 5-star reads. 21, that's a lot. And there were 18 3-star reads, 3 2-star reads, and I didn't read anything that I rated 1 star this year, which is surprising because I reread Othello. But I had a pretty good year. Like, 4 stars is a good, like, I enjoy a 4-star book. I still enjoy 3-star books, but like 4 stars, I really enjoy them. So I'm very happy with how the reading stats for the year have worked out. It's been quite good. Looking at the diversity of the books that I'm reading, and this is in terms of what's inside of the books themselves rather than anything about the author, and once again this doesn't look great, and it isn't, but it's similar to the series versus standalone, where in actuality 46% of the books I didn't know of any diversity that would need to be listed. I could have been wrong, this could be slightly off because it's a personal, like, do I think that it's mentioned this, but that does mean that it was 54% of my books had some form of diversity within them. The biggest category is other, and I think that is because a lot of my books mentioned more than one, so race, LGBTQ, disabilities. If that mentions LGBTQ plus and disabilities, I'm going to put it in other, so that is why that category is the biggest. The books that I read that were about one issue only, race is the most common, with, let's see, mixed. Oh, there's a mixed. I think I forgot about mixed. Oops. I genuinely think I forgot mixed was there and kept putting them in other. It's fine, just combine them, it's fine. And then disabilities was 6%, so that's, let's have a look at how many books it was. Okay, so no representation at all that I noted down is 37 books, and then other and mixed, because I'm an idiot, is 22 books. Is it? Yes. Books with race mentioned and discussed throughout, there was 13 of them. There were 5 books that had diversity for disabilities and 3 books that had diversities for LGBTQ+. This is, of course, something that I am still working on, but it is good to kind of see that it is getting there and making progress. So we shall see, and I will remember to categorise things correctly next year. In terms of whether a book was in translation or not, I don't read as many translated works as I would like, but I did manage to read 7% of my books as being translated works from another language. So 6 books out of my total were translated from a different language. I am hoping to increase this. Once again, there are a lot of translated books that are on my wish list and my TBR and things like that at the minute, so hopefully this number will be increasing as the years go on, but I'm just happy that I am still including translated authors in my reading for now. Then, looking at the years that the books were published, the vast majority of these books, 52%, were published between 2016 and 2019. I did not expect that. I thought that a lot more of my books would have been published more in the 11 to 15 bracket, but as you can see, none of them were. I didn't read a single book published between 2011 and 2015 this year, and I don't know how that happened. I also didn't read any books from the 90s, the decade I was born in, but I read books set before the 20s. I read a book in the 40s, the 60s and the 70s. So yes, 33 books from 2016 to 2019, which I'm decently happy with, and also I didn't bring in that many new books, so the fact that I only read 4 from 2020 is probably a good thing. I think most of them were arcs. Then from 2000 to 2005 and 2006 to 2010, both of those I read 10 books from each section, so 20 from that decade, which is not too bad. And then, as said before, 1 from the 60s and 70s each, 1 from the 40s, and then 3 from the 20s or earlier, which will be the classics that I read. I really wasn't expecting there to be such a big spike for the 2016 to 2019 books. I thought that there would be more of an even selection in that 2000 to 2020 bracket. I didn't expect like the big spike. And then time for the big breakdown, which is the genres. So I'm quite happy with how this graph looks. As you can see, I read 39 fantasy books this year. That's 49%, almost half the books that I read are categorised as fantasy. I love it. I'm so happy. I am surprised with how high contemporary is. It looks really big, but it is only 9 books. And I'm pretty sure I took part in the contemporary-a-thon, so that's probably why. And I took part in the thriller-a-thon as well, which is probably why for the mystery thriller. So both of those were 9 books. And then the next highest was non-fiction at 7. I'm so glad that this is like decently up there. I love reading non-fiction. I don't read enough non-fiction, and I don't think BookTube reads enough non-fiction, so I'm very happy that that is up there. Historical fiction and memoir both got 4 books each in them. Sci-fis and classics both got 3 each, and then the rest were 1 book, so that's literary fiction and poetry. I've been wanting to delve back into fantasy more this year. This year, 2020. That's what I'd wanted to do. I wanted to read more fantasy. When I started on BookTube, as a kid, I read a load of historical fiction and fantasy. And then when I started on BookTube, I saw all of these books and they all sounded so interesting, so I was delving into them all and trying every genre. And I kind of realised, no, I'm still a fantasy person. So I'm very happy that I've managed to like solidly read almost half of my books as fantasy. I'd love to delve more into sci-fi. I've never really read a lot of it, but what I have read I've enjoyed. So the fact that I only read, what was it, 3? Yeah, 3 sci-fi books. I'd like to read more next year. I have at least 1 on my physical TBR, but I think that's it. So I will have to have a look around for those and see what I can add. Any recommendations for sci-fi are very welcome. And now on to the authors themselves. First up we have the author genders, so that's male, female, and then other. This isn't my spreadsheet. Other I used for anybody who was non-binary, as well as any joint authors of books. So for example, Illuminae with J. Christoph and Amy Kaufman would be in other, but then also Rivers Solomon, who is a non-binary author, was in other. So that's kind of what that combines. I had 6 that were either written by non-binary authors or by more than one author, and then the majority of my books, 52 of them, were female, with 22 being male. I always have a really female heavy selection of books, and I'm more than happy to continue with that. I do read from men, clearly. I read 22 books written by blokes this year, and I do have a decent number of books written by men on my shelves. That isn't something I'm altogether bothered about trying to fix. I know that ideally I would have, you know, like evenly split thirds for each of these sections, but I'm happy reading more women than men. And I shall consider if I want to change that or not. But I'm happy with that at the minute. So one that I'm not so happy with is the race of the authors. So 67, I almost said 63, 67 of the books that I read were by a white author, with 13 of the books being by an author of colour. I need to read a lot more authors of colour. I do think it is partly because I have been reading my shelves. A lot of the author of colour books were from ebooks that I was reading and getting onto my Kindle. So that is going to be something that I'm going to have to do more of if I'm wanting to even out this pie chart for 2021. But I still do want to read my shelves, but I have got more authors of colour on my shelves, so yeah, it's just working towards getting there. Then looking at the continent that the authors come from before then delving into the countries, and the majority of the authors that I read from, 49%, is Europe, which I am perfectly fine with. Let's see, that's 39 books I read came from authors from Europe, not necessarily from the UK. Some of them would be from Ireland or from mainland Europe. I'm happy with that being my main sector. I would like some of the other ones to be bigger, but I'm happy with Europe being my main sector because I am European. Despite Brexit, I am European. So I'm quite happy with that. North America was 28 books. I would like to get that down, but realistically, with how books are marketed on the internet, a lot of the books that I see that I'm then intrigued to read are American or North American. So this includes, I read The Testaments this year, so Margaret Atwood, so it includes Canadians as well. I would like to reduce that, but at the same time, it's just unrealistic, really. And then out of the other continents, I've actually removed Antarctica and South America from the pie chart because I didn't read any books from them. Antarctica I could live with, but I would like to read some books from South Africa. I've been to Guyana, and so I'd love to read some Guyanese fiction, as well as just kind of delving more into that realm. I've also just thought North America is going to include Mexico, so that's not so bad. Maybe I just need to read more Mexican authors. And then in terms of the other continents, Africa and Asia had one book each. I believe that is Freshwater by Akwaeke Emezi, and Before the Coffee Gets Cold, Tales from the Cafe by Toshigawa Kawaguchi. Those are the two from there. And then I read 11 books from Oceania, which is Australia, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, and I think all of those are from Australia. I might be wrong, but I think. And that was me reading the 4 books of Pellinor by Alison Croggan, which are all she's from Australia. And then I also read a lot of A.B. Endicott's books, and she is Australian. So literally it's just 2 authors is why that purple bit is so big. I love it. Then on to author nationality, so this is breaking it down specifically by country, and once again, unsurprisingly, the vast majority of the books that I read came from the UK, from England, Wales, Scotland or Northern Ireland, and I am okay with that. I would like to diversify the rest of the list a bit more, but I am happy with the majority of my reading coming from my own country. I'm not mad about that. Next highest on the list was the US with 27 books. I wouldn't mind reducing that, but same thing as mentioned before. And Australia was indeed 11 books, so all of those books for Oceania were from Australia. So quickly going through the smaller breakdowns after the 31 UK, 28 US and 27 US, damn it, and the 11 Australian. Then there's also 1 from Austria, 1 from Canada, 1 from Germany, 2 from Ireland, 3 from Italy, 1 from Japan, 1 from Nigeria and 1 from Switzerland. I had to look at that list, I was not going to remember that. So I would like to increase that more. There's quite a few from Italy. I do believe that is just because I was reading non-fiction books about Vesuvius and Pompeii. I'm pretty sure that's why there was 4% of the books from Italy, so that could probably be improved upon. That won't be the same next year. So I would like to spread that a bit more, read more diversely, but I don't think next year that will be happening as much as I want it to. I think next year will look pretty similar to this year, hopefully slightly better, but just because I am still trying to get through my shelves, it limits it a bit. And that's it. Those are the stats for the books that I read in 2020. They weren't too bad. They weren't too bad. I read an okay amount of books considering 2020 and that I started a new job, which I have to commute to, despite the fact that it's 2020. Don't ask. So that obviously takes up a lot of my time, which is why I'm doing all of my filming for the end of the year stuff over my very short Christmas holiday. So yeah, that takes up a lot of time. I'm still getting used to that, so hopefully I'll be able to keep balancing that alongside reading and making content next year, fingers crossed. And I'm actually filming today with my parents in the house, which I don't normally do. I normally try and film when they're out. One, because there'll be background noise if you've heard any creaking and shutting of doors and stuff, that's my mum and dad. And then secondly, just because of embarrassment. I just decided not to. Also, you may have noticed I didn't swear in this video. If you're a consistent viewer of my channel, my mum does not like swearing, so I can't do that when she's in the house. But this was kind of an experiment. Basically, this was something simple, going through stats, nice and easy, just trying to see how I feel about filming when my parents are in the house. And it wasn't too bad. I don't think I could film if the door was open, so you may be getting more of this background rather than the big bookshelves in the study. It's a spare room, and that will hopefully help me to get through some more filming in 2021, because I have limited time off. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Let me know any of your stats down in the comments below, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!